All right, everybody. Well, hello. Good to see you all again. Good to be in front of you again. Long hiatus, as I was mentioning before. Um, just thumbing my way through things that I've set aside as kind of video worthy in some kind of specific order. But this is one I had planned for a previous Radium episode. Um, it's been quoted from before, but similar to my previous video about the Great Pyramid being Noah's Ark. Um, it was requested that I present the entire article as I had just kind of quoted the article in a previous episode. So here we are. As you can tell by the thumbnail, how sunspots control our weather. El Paso Herald, 1912. Pretty interesting one. And it's going to lead us into another book. One of the fantastic things, again, about these newspapers is as I follow some sources, it's led me in just incredible directions and material that's outside of the strictly newspaper realm. And this one's about H.G. Wells and a book of his that I had heard of but was not familiar with at all, and is quite incredible and worthy of a deeper dive, which we will definitely be doing later down the road. Um, and another update on my Anomalous America, as many of you have been asking. The Indiana episode will be coming out this week. I plan on probably recording it and doing a premiere. As early recordings and early lives and so forth, there's even more up in the air and far less likely to be happening. But yeah, that's out. That's going to be out this week. Mark my words. Before Sunday, we'll be back on the Anomalous America train, and which is good because it's my mental space has been clouded with mere material outside of the Anomalous America um, space. And yeah, so it'll be good to get back into the swing of that. So, and as always, thanks for being here. Um, love you guys. Let's jump into this. Time is precious, and I'm grateful for you spending yours with me. Like I said, El Paso Herald, 1912. How the sunspots control our weather. Like I like to do, I'm going to go through the captions here and read them to you. A sunspot is like an enormous electric dynamo. Its tremendous whirl generates an enormous magnetic field, just as the whirling armature of a dynamo the same size would generate. Quite fantastic, as we've mentioned so many times before, these inventions that just take a book from nature, right? And I don't think it's coincidental when you look at, especially when it comes to electrical machinery, especially mid to early 1800s. Quite interesting. I love that analogy. Thinking anode, cathode, right? And the relationship, as I've stated so many times before, between radium and the sun and radium and the earth, radium and the ionization of air, lightning being a direct source of this relationship between radium and the ionization of air. I've shown in one of my radium episodes, I talk about the two most lightning hot active areas of the United States and how they are directly related to large amounts of radium. And this is kind of going to be along those lines. This is an article I've quoted in one of my radium episodes. And this one here, it says the magnetic force given off by the sunspot is conveyed by the ether to the atmosphere of the Earth, thereby disturbing its equilibrium and causing violent storms and periods of unusual cold and heat. Now, this is fantastic because it's going to correlate again with what I've been mentioning with volcanic activity, magma, the molten magnetic fluid, iron fluid just like the human body, and its correlation with not only magnetism but radium and these unusual weather patterns that follow not only high sunspot activity, low sunspot activity, but also comets and many other things. But yeah, let's get another one here going. This one here, the most remarkable photograph of the sunspots that has ever been made. The picture was taken at Mount Wilson University, California. It shows gigantic sunspots circling the equator. The white clouds are calcium vapors at enormous temperatures. We have quite excellent pictures nowadays, but for 1912, that was pretty incredible. One of the first photographs taken of the solar cyclone surrounding a sunspot. The leaping flames are 100,000 miles high and are a source of the magnetism that affects our weather. Now, whether or not you believe the sun is X amount of distance away from Earth, our ability to take a picture like this at this magnification in the sun's distance in that time frame also raises many questions. This one right here, part of the one that I've quoted from before. In H.G. Wells' strange story, The Men on the Moon, the moon folk, highly developed insects who live underground, express wonder that Earth folk should be so unscientific as to live on the surface of a planet and be subject to storms and so on. Here, the scientist who invaded the moon is seen sending magnetic messages to Earth. The costumes here are just so interesting, and it just brings back, the Hopi legends with the ant people, and there's many overlays, and H.G. Wells we'll get into. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about H.G. Wells, what stuff about him sticks out to you, and I think I'll definitely be covering the Men on the Moon first. But 1984. There's so many that stand out. But again, I look forward to reading what you guys have to say about it. An aurora curtain, a wonderful phenomenon produced by a bombardment of magnetism from the sun. Now, I've also in my radium series talked about the correlations between the aurora borealis and radium. There's going to be a lot of overlap here, but not directly quoting radium. But if you've been following that series, you'll be able to see it for yourself. So yeah, let's get right into this. It's quite a long one. The amazing vagaries of the weather during the past few months, devastating floods, first in the old world and then in the new. A warm winter in Alaska, such as has never been known there before, coinciding with a severe winter here. An unprecedentedly early and abundant release of the icebergs from Greenland and their disastrous invasion of the steamer lines, a late spring in the United States with sudden and violent changes of temperature, snowstorms in March, cold and warm waves abruptly following each other in April and May, thunderstorms in early May, a series of terrific tornadoes sweeping whole towns to destruction in the west and southwest. All these things reawaken interest in the question of the influence of sunspots upon the weather. Interest that is emphasized by the fact that outbursts of such spots have lately occurred, to which some observers attribute all this unwanted atmospheric disturbance. Some go as far as to aver that they can predict great storms and weather changes by means of the spots on the sun. Among these is Father Picard of the Santa Clara College Observatory, California, who ascribes sunspots to the influence of the larger planets. Really important influence there, and a note that should be overemphasized. Um, Sunspots ascribe to the influence of the larger planets. Now, maybe in another episode or a radium episode, we'll talk about the solar cycles, the sun cycles, the sunspot cycles, 11 years, and the minimum maximums. And um, we'll get into perhaps some books by one of my favorite authors, Maurice Cotterell, and his explanation and researches into sunspots and human cataclysms and evolution, de-evolution, so forth. His theories are standalone and are quite exceptional. Some of my favorite. Perhaps we'll get into some of those later as well. Inasmuch as the positions of these planets can be foretold, and inasmuch as their arrival at certain positions in their orbits is alleged to exert an influence upon the sun, tending to make spots burst out, the possibility of predictions like those that Father Bricard and others have made cannot be denied, provided that we grant their assumptions. Father Picard claims that his past predictions have been verified to the very date, and he makes another series for May and suggests that one could be made for June, based on a great solar manifestation, which a French astronomer has foretold for that month. In view of these things, it becomes highly important to review what the leaders in astronomy have learned and believe concerning the influence of sunspots on the Earth. First, what are sunspots? Recently, it has been discovered that sunspots are vortexes in which the whirling motion carries matter from the surface outward. They have been likened to waterspouts at sea, the trumpet shaped part being at the top, and the material within being whirled upward. Since there is a great variety of substances in the sun, such as iron, calcium, silicon, sodium, copper, magnesium, and in short, almost every element known to us on the earth, and since these substances are brought into violent friction contact by the whirling motions, it is believed that powerful charges of electricity are produced in the spots. And as the charged matter is spun around in the vortex, great electrical currents are set up, which in turn produce in every sunspot a gigantic magnetic field. A magnetic field means a space within which lines of magnetic force are in action. Thus, a sunspot might be regarded as resembling a tremendous dynamo, creating electrical currents of unimaginable power. Everybody knows that a dynamo consists of two essential parts. First, a powerful electromagnet, which creates around its poles a magnetic field. And second, an armature, consisting of wires wound around an iron wheel or a cylindrical core, which is caused to rotate rapidly in the magnetic field. The change in the number of lines of the magnetic force flowing through the coils of the rotating wires sets up a current of electricity in the coils, and this current can be led away by other wires into an external circuit by which lamps may be illuminated or mechanical work done. In short, the dynamo is a machine for converting mechanical energy into electrical energy by means of electromagnetic induction, and the electrical energy thus produced can be turned back into mechanical energy to be utilized in a different way in a different place from that in which it was first used. While it is in the form of electrical energy, it can be carried long distances by wires and recharged into mechanical energy at the place where it is needed to do work. Now, it would appear that in a sunspot, where first a tremendous magnetic field is produced by the friction of different materials brushing against one another, and then vast currents of electricity are set up by the whirling of great quantities, in this magnetic field, we have a kind of natural dynamo of the most gigantic power. Something of the same kind appears to occur, though on a relatively very small scale, in a volcanic eruption. This is key. We talked about the volcanic eruptions, how a mountain that once had a very strong northern pole on a compass would immediately change polarities during an eruption. And the largest um, quantity of lightning strikes ever recorded in human history happened very recently in the eruption of a volcano um, near Tonga. Quite amazing. And that huge lightning shows are put on that exit from these volcanoes. And the relationship there is very, very important. Where was I? As of Vesuvius, when electrical currents are set in motion and tremendous discharges of lightning occur. Thus, it is not difficult to account for the fact that the sun, when disturbed by the outbreak of great spots, becomes a center of immense electrical disturbance. But the next question is, how is this disturbance transmitted to the Earth? The current produced by a dynamo is led away by wires, but there are no wires between the Earth and the sun. The solar disturbances should create around the sun an electrical field sufficiently extensive to involve the Earth at a distance of 93 million miles, or that this field should act upon the Earth by induction at such a distance may seem incredible, but the difficulty may be explained in this way. The experiments which led to the invention of wireless telegraphies have taught us that when an electrical discharge takes place, as when a spark is caused to leap from the conductor, electrical waves are set up in the ether, which sped away on all sides with the velocity of light, 186 miles per second. The electrical waves that are able to produce travel thousands of miles in a fraction of a second. Now, it is known that in and around sunspots, tremendous electrical discharges must frequently occur, incomparably more powerful than any we can produce with our petty instruments. And some of these solar outbursts have been caught in the act of darting their waves to the earth. Everybody has heard of the northern lights or the aurora borealis, and many have seen these strange phenomena even here in New York. Around the magnetic poles, the earth, they are at constant occurrence, but they become visible in the temperate zones only when the earth's magnetism is greatly and violently disturbed. Such disturbances generally occur coincidentally with some sudden outburst around a big spot. In fact, it has now come to be recognized that the association of sunspots with the aurora borealis is the most intimate character, and that whenever the average number and size of sunspots increases, as it does periodically about every 11 years, there's that number, very important, the number and brilliance of the aurora displays increase also. When there are few sunspots, there are few aurora. We may picture this action to the imagination in this way. On one side, we have the sun in a state of intense electromagnetic activity, owing to the outbursts of sunspots. On the other side, we have the Earth itself, a magnetized body, and surrounded by an atmosphere whose electric condition is subject to the slightest disturbance. A specifically intense outburst occurs on the sun, and electrical waves start off into space, crossing the 93 million miles to Earth in about 8 minutes. A telegraph operator on the Earth happens to be seated at his instrument sending a dispatch. Suddenly, it ceases to work. Then the sparks of fire leap from it, and he starts away in alarm. The impulse from the sun has arrived and set wild currents upon the Earth, which flow lawlessly through the telegraph wires. At the same time, the sky in the north begins to flame. Great sheets of lambent fire, sometimes colored red, wave and flicker in the sky. Now, the difference between um, these different types of aurora and all these other types of atmospheric displays, um, these elven rings and all these other um, kind of mythological names for these types of events, are all absolutely electromagnetically based. Where was I? Great sheets of lambent fire, sometimes colored red, okay, obscuring the stars with their brilliance. Vast glowing columns appear to rise from the northern horizon in the direction of the Earth's magnetic pole. In the zenith, a shining circle makes its appearance, appearing and disappearing as by magic. Such a disturbance may last for many hours, and the telegraphs and ocean cables may be interrupted all over the Earth. This is called a magnetic storm, and there can no longer be any doubt that its source is to be sought in the sun. The question remains, how can sunspots affect such things as winds, rain, storms, and warm and cold waves? A magnetic storm is not a storm in the ordinary meaning of the word, but it has been observed that clouds are more prevalent in times of great aurora activity, and this gives a clue to the manner in which electrical impulses from the sun may directly affect the general state of the weather. The effect of electrical discharges is to ionize the air, through which they pass. I'll make sure to leave a link to my radium episode where I talk quite a bit about lightning, and this will correlate quite nicely. Correlate. This means that inconceivably minute centers are formed in which bear a charge of negative electricity, and these negatively charged corpuscles, as they are called, become centers of condensation of moisture. Thus, the state of the air, as to the clearness or cloudiness, may be affected by the electrical waves emanating from the sun. The condensation of the moisture sets up other activities. Air currents are produced. Differences of barometric pressure result. Winds spring up, cold air is brought into temperate ranges from the polar areas, resulting in a cold wave, or as a final result of the electrical changes, warm air flows over cold regions, and thus an extraordinary melting of ice and snow is produced in high northern latitudes. The latest sunspot maximum, that is, the period when the sunspots were most numerous, occurred in 1906. We are now at a period in the cycle when the spots of a new period are beginning to appear, and it usually happens that at the beginning of such a period, the electromagnetic effects of the sun are most noticed. As a whole, the temperature of Earth is lower at the time of maximum sunspottedness, but at such times, continual and sudden changes are going on which produce similar changes on the Earth. The result is the production of extraordinary storms. Indeed. Now, to finish this off, we're going to do a little look at more of Maurice Cotterell's work. Um, I've mentioned him several times in several different videos. He is one of my favorite authors. There are many, many interviews of him from 10, 15 years ago. If this is something that interests you, I strongly recommend his work. He shows how the ancients encoded this 11-year solar cycle into their lore, their calendars, the Mayas especially, and why I chose to kind of tie this in with the Maya. Um, his books are phenomenal. They're becoming harder and harder to find. I've had them all for quite some time. I strongly recommend get your hands on them while you can before they become incredibly expensive, which some of them already are. His website is fantastic. He's just come out with some new material, which I plan on doing a short little video about, and it's Janus overlays, as well as the magnetism, polarities, and all those kind of overlays, which he doesn't touch too much on Janus. It's my own opinions, but his terracotta warriors, all these books are incredible. But we're going to look at these two little panels here. We'll start with this one. He shows quite amazing proofs when he came out with his solar sunspot minimum maximum calendar in the 187-year cycle that he correlates it. Again, I don't agree with dates, um, but he shows sunspot cycles in the fall and rise of civilizations, and I strongly think there is quite a lot of proof to this. The Peruvians knew about the sun cycles, and they knew that at certain maximums, um, there would be spontaneous fetal abortion from all of the radiation, and that all the babies would die instantly in the womb. And so they constructed many of these ancient sites um, to block this radiation. And that at certain times of these cycles, they knew that the women had to stay underground and couldn't come outdoors because of the radiation levels, or they would be losing their baby. And the falls of birth rates and civilizations correlate quite nicely with this. Here's a little representation here showing the sun's slower spinning polar magnetic field interferes with the equatorial magnetic field, neutralizing a different field sector every month. Um, Something that I'm sure some of you have seen, but the overlay of astrology here is quite interesting. Distribution and dispersion of the astrological elements, monthly intervals. Feel free again to just pause the video if you want to look at these a little bit more yourself. I'll zoom in and just scroll up and down for you here a little bit so you can read these a little bit more. Again, I strongly recommend his books. And, but yeah, I thought this was just a tiny little bit of his material worth noting that tied in with the information presented above. And perhaps it'll be a transition into some of Maurice's books, as I have almost all his books above me here. And the books that specifically this graph comes out of is incredible. Super Gods is one of my favorites. Terracotta Warriors, these are all amazing. His material is great. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he states, and his opinion has morphed over time. So just like anybody's. But yeah, I think we're gonna shut her down there. Um, as always, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys very much. Have a wonderful day.